Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. It was quite the scandal. David was an up-and-comer in the court of King Saul, and King Saul was threatened by David's rising popularity and vowed to kill him. King Saul's son Jonathan warned David, and David fled Jerusalem quick and in a hurry. So much so, in fact, that he didn't have time to prepare or pack a thing. He had some soldiers who followed him, however. Then they came to a place called Nob, to a priest named Ahimelech, and David asked Ahimelech for some food for some men and himself. Ahimelech answered, "Alas, I have no regular bread here. All I have is showbread." David took the showbread and gave it to his followers, and they ate. Centuries later, Jesus' disciples collected some grain on the Sabbath, and when the Pharisees accused them of breaking Sabbath law, Jesus pointed to this event with David to make the point that human need supersedes Sabbath rules. So we are left with a question: what in the world is showbread? This week we are looking at the worship center for ancient Israel, which was called the Tabernacle. I'll remind you that the word tabernacle means dwelling place, and the name itself reminded people that God was dwelling in their midst, a great comfort and help. But as we continue on our tour, today we come to the table with the showbread. As we came in from the east, we passed the altar of bronze where sacrifices for sin were made, and then we moved past the laver, which reminded them of how God had led them through the sea on dry land and was a vehicle for cleansing ritual for the priests. Continuing our westward movement, we then came to the holy place, the actual tent of the tabernacle, and inside was a table on one side with the showbread on it. The table of showbread was a small table made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. It measured 3 feet by 1.5 feet and was 2 feet 3 inches high. It stood on the right side of the holy place across from the lampstand and held 12 loaves of bread representing the 12 tribes of Israel. The priests baked the bread with fine flour, and it remained on the table before the Lord for a week. Every Sabbath day the priest would remove it and eat it in the holy place, then put fresh bread on the table. Only priests could eat the bread, and it could only be eaten in the holy place because it was holy. That's why what David did was so scandalous. Only priests were allowed to eat this special bread. But there's a lot more significance to it than that. The showbread was special. Showbread was also called bread of the presence because it was to be always in the Lord's presence. The table and the bread were a symbol of God's willingness to be in fellowship and communion with people. It was like an invitation to share a meal, an extension of friendship. Eating together often is an act of fellowship. God was willing for people to enter into his presence to fellowship with God, and this invitation was always open. This invitation is always open. Even today, we eat during our worship time, and it's a meal of communion. As we eat the bread and drink the wine, we are in union with one another. As we eat the bread and drink the wine, we are in union with God. We experience anew God's grace and love, just like they did. There are several special moments for me on Sunday morning as I lead worship. First, when I step on the distinctive flooring around our altar, I feel like Moses before the burning bush. I am on holy ground. Then later, when I get to uncover the communion on our altar, it feels as if I am unveiling the very love of God. Finally, as I consecrate the elements, I get to lift them before you. In that moment, I am showing you the bread of God's presence among us. Perhaps it's our own showbread. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.